Welcome into another edition of the FutureSox RoundUp. My name is Elijah Evans, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host Jeff Cohen. We come to you today at the beginning of the All-Star break. It is Monday the 15th as we're recording. The Home Run Derby's tonight. The All-Star Game is tomorrow. I just finished up covering day 2 of the MLB Draft with day 3 coming tomorrow. It's a huge week for FutureSox. It's a huge few weeks for the White Sox organization. I mean, there is a ton going on. We're going to dive into all of it today. We've got a draft special coming later this week with Dylan Barnes and myself. We were on a stream last night for the first 2 rounds with James Fox and Ian Eskridge. And Jeff and I are going to do a little bit of draft talk today, as well as going through the system, focusing on the Charlotte Knights, which are quietly a very exciting minor league team at this point. But before we dive into all of that today, Jeff, how you doing?
Well, Elijah, I was doing pretty well after a great week of Knights baseball, and then we talked off camera about the draft, and you got me a little nervous here.
We'll see. We're going to get into it. There's some positives. There's also some things I'm a little confused about, a little frustrated with, but there's a lot to talk about. Before we do that, let's go over the records. All of the White Sox affiliates are off until Friday. They get an All-Star break, just as the MLB guys get an All-Star break. Like we talked about, Jeff, this is a really good thing for the organization. I think there's a lot of pitchers in the system that have been pitching all season and pitching really well, but I think the All-Star break honestly comes at a perfect time for some of these guys to get a break, to reset a little bit, and to get geared up for the last month and a half of minor league baseball, where we're hoping to see a bunch of these guys make the major leagues, in addition to other guys get promoted and challenged at the next levels. So we're excited. We're ready to go. The records of the teams right now heading into this few-day break. Charlotte is 41-49. 41-49, Jeff. Charlotte is like not far from being a 500 team after a really brutal start to the season. Pretty cool stuff. Birmingham is 47-40, so the opposite trend for Birmingham is a lot of those guys have gone to Charlotte and to Chicago. Birmingham has struggled of late. Winston-Salem is 40-47, and then Kannapolis rounds it out at 50-37. Kannapolis is about to get a lot of reinforcements from this draft class. Like I was just thinking about on air, some of these guys, to me, it seems like the majority of the guys drafted between yesterday and today will be going to Kannapolis later this season. And then the ACL Arizona Complex League White Sox are 22-29, and the DSL 9-21. Those are the records for the White Sox affiliates right now. Let's start with the draft, though. We're going to get into some other stuff later. We're going to focus on the Charlotte Knights, but the draft, Jeff. So I've been super tuned in. Yesterday we were live for Future Sox, and then kind of writing. I was writing analysis today. I was watching every pick made, and I did a write up that'll be published as you're hearing this tomorrow. My write up will be published with details on all of the draft picks from today's group. But the first thing in the draft totally caught me off guard. I heard from a buddy that a guy I know that has some people in the industry that Hagen Smith was looking like an option, and I was like, why in the world are they going pitcher? And at first, my initial mind, I was confused. Right, my initial thought was like, why a pitcher? The more that I think about it, and the more that I reflect on it yesterday, the less opposed I was to the idea, based on the fact that the organization knows they can develop pitching. They know they can develop these left-handed, funky, nasty pitchers. I mean, look at Crochet, Schultz, Chris Sale in the past, right? Like that has been a staple for the White Sox organization. So to a degree, I can understand the lens of like, let's lean into our strengths, get a guy that we know is going to be a stud pitcher, as opposed to hitters that we might have some concerns about. There might be some things. I think JJ Weatherholt's a really excellent hitter, so I'm still a little bit confused why they held off on a guy like JJ Weatherholt. But at the same time, they're leaning into their strength. They're going to commit now to getting hitting prospects via trades, right? So now even more than before, you already were kind of planning on that. But now that you get Hagen Smith, now it's like your Crochet trade, your Fetty trade has to be for upper, hitting prospects that are developed, right? So if the logic is like, let's lean into developing what we develop and then trade for hitters, which we're not as good at developing, I'm not opposed. I can see the idea behind it. What was your thought, Jeff? I know you're not super in the draft, but what was your initial thought when you saw they went with a pitcher, which nobody expected them to do?
Well, a buddy of mine texted me and he said, "Look, we should be excited. They got the best pitcher in the draft." He's had this guy rated over Chase Burns.
A lot of people did.
Yeah, and so that is exciting. But God, look at who they passed up. They passed up some big time hitters, and we'll see. You might be right. Maybe they're just leaning into what they do best. But wow, they passed some interesting
Yeah,
bats.
it's a fascinating situation. So it's tough. It's it's confusing, but I don't hate it. And then when you see in the next two picks yesterday to start the draft, right, they go two super upside high school guys. They went with Caleb Bonnemer, who I did a full write up on, high school shortstop, probably will be a third baseman long term, but a ton of natural power. 18 years old from Michigan, really young, still got some things to kind of develop out with his swing, but like this is a guy that's going to stick on the left side of the infield, above average arm, has the arm for shortstop or third. If he bulks up a little and frames out, he's probably a third baseman, but like a lot of offensive upside. You're talking about a guy that like could be, that 30 home run type of infielder if things go well for Bonnemer. And then a guy in Blake Larson who's a nasty, nasty high school pitcher, IMG Academy, really, really gross breaking ball for a kid that age. And just, someone who I think is another guy that they pried away from a college commitment, and they're going to try and, those are two guys you're taking a huge swing at, but they've got plenty of upside. And based on how things went today, those guys must have been pretty expensive. So I think the world now with NIL and with college deals and all this stuff, it's like you got to pay these high school guys. And the high school guys are getting a lot of money to pry away from their college commitments because they know they can go to college and still make money. So in order to sign, they need to be getting more money than they would substantially more money than they would get by going the college route, right? So it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of nuances to the MLB draft, and it's something I'm still learning myself. I will admit I'm not going to act like I'm an expert, but it's an interesting first day. I liked it overall, even with the Smith thing. 2 of 3 pitchers in the first 2 days is weird, but at the same time, 2 upside high school guys paired with a surefire college guy. I like the idea behind that. Today just confused the heck out of me, Jeff. I just did not understand the vision today, and I just don't get where the money is, and I'm just really, really antsy to see where the bonus allotments and the slot monies, what the money allocated goes to, because it seems like today was just a constant saving money effort. Like it basically felt like every single pick, 3rd through 10th rounds today, was some sort of effort to save money, which I just don't get. Hayden Smith should have been an underslot for a guy that with JJ and with Jack on the board. I figured Hayden Smith was going to get a lot less than the slot value at pick number 5. And then the 2 high school guys, both really talented, but both still guys that I thought were going to be around the slot value, maybe a little bit over for a guy like Bonnemer. But I don't get where the money went, unless they have a guy that they're lining up in the 11th or 12th round tomorrow that they're going to give a ton of money, all the extra bonus money to. Like, it's not impossible. Maybe there's a George Walkow out there that they're waiting till the 11th round to snag. I'm confused, and I'm a little just frustrated by the situation, honestly.
Elijah, compare this draft to the previous 2 Mike Shirley drafts in terms of allocating the money and going under slot versus over slot.
That's an excellent idea. I'm going to pull up these draft numbers right now because I'm just not sure. I'm not sold. You look at last year. So for instance, last year, Jacob Gonzalez was $500,000 under the slot value at the 15th overall pick. I figured when initially the pick was made that Hagen Smith would be at least 500,000, if not 800,000 under the slot value at pick 5. So in my mind, I was like, okay, we're entering the second round at a similar point as last year, where you've got some money saved from that first pick. You go under slot with a college guy, and you've got some money to play with. Grant Taylor goes for exactly at the pick value at pick number at the second round last year. He was exactly at slot. Caleb Bonnemer this year, high school guy, definitely probably even a little bit more than a Taylor just because he's a high school guy and you got to pry him away from a big commitment, right? But I figured he was maybe a 200 over slot maybe, but nothing crazy. I assumed in my mind, and then Blake Larson at the third pick. Last year, Seth Keener was basically slot a little bit under, but basically at slot value as well. I assumed that Larson and, Bonnemer being over, maybe you're around even. I still thought they'd be a little bit under, considering Hagen Smith I thought would be a discount. Clearly that was not the case. They must have been significantly over yesterday based on those first 3 picks over the slot value. They must have gone way over for both the high school guys in Bonnemer and Larson, because going into today, there was 8 picks made, and I think at least 6 of them were under slot. At least 5, minimum 5, were significantly under slot. I mean, there were 3 or 4 senior signings. Senior signings usually only get $10,000, $20,000 bonus values, right? So then you look at last year's draft in comparison, right? Calvin Harris was about slot value. Christian Opper, they went over 150. Lucas Gordon was about slot, a little bit under. And then George Walkow, they go $750,000 over to sign a Walkow, and then followed up with Park at slot, Peppers at slot. Zach Franklin was the underslot guy, and then Nishida at slot, basically. So Nishida was overslot. Nishida and Lacombe were both overslot. So it just, I don't know, Jeff. I'm confused because this draft, I know for people listening and for those that aren't necessarily as tuned into this draft so far, this draft today, starting in the 3rd round, they go Nick McLean, Nick McLean is the younger brother of Matt McLean on the Reds, who is an extremely good hitter for the Reds, one of the Reds' young bright stars right now. Nick McLean's an interesting bat. He was projected as a 4th rounder, goes in the 3rd round. That's probably about slot value. He's a switch-handing outfielder, got good contact skills, kind of should gain into some more power, was injured throughout the season, but quickly saw the stock rise a little bit. This is a guy that kind of shot up boards a little bit because when he got healthy later this season, he looked really strong to finish out his college career. Big league, bloodlines, all that stuff. Like, that's exciting. I like it. McLean probably is a guy that was about the slot pick. 2 more college hitters after that to follow it up. Casey Sauke, who's a University of Virginia outfielder. A lot of power, some swing and miss concerns, probably around slot as well. I thought he'd be a little under, honestly, but probably about slot. And then they finish out that top 5 rounds with Sam Antonacci, who's a Coastal Carolina guy, was a JUCO, was the best junior college player in the country in 2022. Transfers to Coastal Carolina, had a really good season, elite contact skills. I comped him to Brooks Baldwin on Twitter. This is a guy that's just absolutely a little less power than Brooks, but just such good field to hit, great contact, plays all over the infield, that type of guy right there for Antonacci. So interesting 3 college guys, and I figured those 3 were probably all around slot value. But then 6 through 10, 5 straight players that I think have to be significantly under their slot value at those picks. Then the 6th round, they go with Jackson Appel, a 5th-year senior catcher who probably gets the very minimum bonus. I don't think he gets much of anything. He looked good this season at Texas A&M, but I compared him to Michael Turner kind of, but a little, an experienced senior guy. He's going to help the pitching staff at the minor league levels, can instantly go probably to Winston. Maybe can't he, but probably can go to Winston immediately pretty soon, but way under slot. And then they go 3 straight relief pitchers, Jeff. In the 7th, 8th, and 9th rounds are all designated relief pitchers in college, all guys that have not started in years, all significantly under slot. 2 of the 3 of them are seniors. Aaron Combs, I like in the 8th round. He's a University of Tennessee guy. He closed out the College World Series, so a little bit of high leverage experience there for a guy like Combs. But Phil Fox, Aaron Combs, Jack Young, all 3 relievers. None of them seem like they have a chance to be a starter, really. All of those guys have to be pretty under slot in terms of value. And then they finished out with Cole McConnell, another senior outfielder from Louisiana Tech. Had a good season, looks like a pretty solid player, well-rounded offensive game, but those last 5 picks are all under slot in my mind, and some of them like significantly under slot. I just don't know where the money went. I'm just really confused, and it looks like it has to mean those first 2 high school guys got a ton of money, which, okay, sure, but I also think there was some better picks at those spots that were more proven. So, like, I get it, but are you really hitching your entire draft essentially at this point on 2 really young high school guys? I'm going to have more later this week on our draft breakdown, but it's weird. It's confusing. And I got the vision after day 1, after those first 3 picks, but today's draft just did not make sense to me, honestly.
So a couple of things. One, you basically slot and money aside, you sound kind of underwhelmed with the second day picks overall.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this in the past, how great the Sox under Mike Shirley have done in the later rounds. I mean, we could rattle off tons of guys like Brooks Baldwin and so many others who they picked up by really shrewd drafting. So
I mean, right? I can't be definitive yet, and that's why we're doing a draft special after the entire draft is done on Wednesday. Me and Dylan are going to record, and we're going to dive into the whole draft because, for all I know, they could absolutely nail picks 11 through 14 like they did last year, right? Brooks Baldwin. I mean, 2 years ago, Brooks Baldwin, Mason Adams. The list goes on and on. Tim Elko. There's so many guys in those later rounds that have turned into really solid players in the farm system, right? So, like, I don't want to jump to conclusions. Like, I mean, I'm glad you gave me that perspective because you're right. Like, they've done a really good job in rounds 11 through 15 in the past few years. Even, I mean, Caden Connor, right? Like Ryan Galaney, like there's guys last year that were really late in the draft that have turned into like good pieces right now. So I don't want to make assumptions yet. But overall, 8 picks made today, and I really only like about 2 of them, to be honest. So, we'll see.
And, rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, those are important rounds. I mean, you can get some really good players. I mean, it's not like you're going to go under slot there so you can sign somebody in the 11th round. I mean, that's nuts.
Right. I do really like both Nick McLean and Sam Antonacci, to be honest. Those are 2 guys I do like in the 3rd and the 5th rounds. I just think they were both probably somewhat of reaches at those picks, and I don't see like I don't see any money spent all day today. So it's like I don't dislike some of these picks. Like I think Nick McLean's a solid hitter. I think he's a switch hitting outfielder with really strong contact skills and room to add power. Like I like that. That's a good profile. That's a profile the White Sox need. I mean, going college outfield in the third and fourth round, I like, but they weren't the best players available, and you didn't spend any money all day. So I just am not sure. And then Antonacci is a guy that's like elite contact skills, an infielder, can play all over the infield. Like I like those players and I like those profiles, but they're somewhat of reaches at a time in the draft where I thought they were going to spend on somebody. I was just waiting this whole day for like the pick that was the walkout pick, or even not even quite that level. Like that's a dramatic case, right? That doesn't happen every draft. You're not going to get a second round talent of a high schooler in the seventh round every year. But I was waiting for something, and the picks kept going, and they kept getting more and more money conscious. Like it doesn't make sense to me. 3 relief pitchers in the first 10 rounds, Jeff. Like, is that really the best use of resources in this draft?
That's really puzzling. Really puzzling.
Yeah. So
I don't know what to read into that.
And it's not even like it's not like a Keener, right? Like it's not like a Keener who you're going to try to make a starter. Like from everything I read today and everything I watched, like all 3 of those relievers taken 7, 8, 9 are all like 100% relievers. Like they're not. One of them is a sidearm funky guy. They're just not going to be starters. So it's like you took 2 starting pitchers. One is, I mean, Hagen Smith is a star, right? And then you took a super high upside high school starting pitcher. At that point, instead of taking those relievers, just get some random college hitters. If you're going to go the college route and you're going to save money, get some hitters. The system needs hitters. What are 3 relief pitchers doing for the system right now? Like the system's already so deep in pitchers. We've got guys that are starting pitchers that are becoming relievers. Why are you drafting designated relievers at this point, especially in the first 10 rounds? This isn't like the 17th round, right? Like, I don't know. I can see some vision, and I'm going to hold. I'm not making a definitive statement on this because we'll see. We'll see what happens tomorrow. They could blow me out the water and come out tomorrow, and the 11th round pick could be a high school superstar that was projected in the 3rd round, and I will shut up and close my mouth. Right? Like that could happen. It's possible.
One last question: when will we find out how much they've allocated to each of these picks?
It varies a lot. Last year we saw, last year some came out really early, and then it took like for Walkout, it took like multiple weeks for it to come out. So it really varies. We'll see what happens. It's definitely not definitive. It's going to be over the next 2 weeks, but it'll definitely vary. And there'll be certain guys that take a few weeks to sign. There'll be certain guys where they come out, tomorrow or the day after, right? So it's going to vary a lot. We'll see what happens, but I mean, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting. I'm excited to see what happens tomorrow. I'll be locked in on the draft again. Everybody should add Elijah EV8 on Twitter. I'm tweeting every draft pick. I'm giving my analysis. I'm giving my take. I'm posting some videos. I started trying some video content on Twitter of just me talking and explaining my thoughts, just to see if people enjoy that engagement style. But I'm locked in. I'm excited. I'm hopeful, but at the same time, like we'll see. Yeah. That's my take. Moving on, we'll get more into the draft later this week. Like I said, Dylan Barnes and I will have a full draft breakdown. We'll break down every single player in the draft class later this week. For now, let's get into the minor league system. But first, I want to talk a little bit. We don't have to talk too much about the Major League Club. Not much of note there. But there was an interesting little side story this week with 4 pitchers in Chicago working with Brian Bannister, working with Paul Janish and the rest of the development staff. And that is Birmingham pitchers Jake Eder, Mason Adams, and Jairo Uriarte, as well as Winston-Salem pitcher Juan Carrella, who's on the dev list right now. But those 3 guys in Birmingham especially all missed their starts this week in favor of throwing bullpens with the Major League Development staff. Eder was actually added to the roster for a game, didn't end up pitching, but all 3 of those guys get kind of a little introduction taste of what their future could hold, which I think is really cool and not something I remember the White Sox doing much in the past. So I really liked hearing that. What was your thoughts when you heard about that, Jeff?
Well, I've talked to a lot of these guys who get drafted and they spend the last couple of weeks of the season in Kannapolis. Maybe they play, maybe they don't, but they all tell me it's invaluable for the next season when they're there at the start of the for opening day and the start of the season, and they already know they know what to expect, and they say it really helps them a lot. So yeah, I'm sure it's only that much more important to get a taste of the major leagues.
Yeah. It's cool. I think it's a good experience. I think it's good for them. I don't think it can't hurt, obviously, right? Like there's no world where that hurts. So it was cool to hear about, and I think it seems like it was a good experience for those guys to be there. And Adams and Eder, at least, right? Those 2. I don't know about Uriarte. I think they're going to be patient with him a little bit because he has had some ups and downs in the last month or 2. But like Adams and Eder should be in Chicago, right? Like later this year, they should hopefully those guys are going to make their debut post deadline or in September call ups, whatever it is. Like I think Eder and Adams both have a very good shot to make their debuts this year. So it's a little taste rest of the future for them.
And I can't believe I'm saying this, but right now there's not room for them in Charlotte. Which,
Yeah, it's crazy, but it's true. No, you're exactly right.
yeah,
So we'll see. It's just it's interesting for sure, but it's
right.
exciting. We'll go through the rest of the system now. We're going to shoot through Kannapolis and Winston and Birmingham quickly because I do want to put some emphasis on your Charlotte Knights, Jeff, who you are do such an excellent job covering, and it's the most exciting Knights team that we've seen in quite some time. So
Yeah.
starting in Canny, what's up with Canny this past week?
Well, I think the big news is they brought in some reinforcements, even ahead of the guys who were coming in after the draft. They added 6 players to the roster. We'll see what they do. I think they've added 4 pitchers, 2 hitters. Most of them are free agents. A couple of guys from the DSL. So new people to watch in Kannapolis. Wasn't a great week for the team. George Walkow did not hit a home run. In fact, he had 11 strikeouts in 19 at bats. But kind of a underwhelming week overall.
Yeah, not a ton in Candy. I mean, the roster's just been depleted over time, I think. You can tell that's obviously a lot of those guys have moved to Winston. And, as the system shifts, right, like you're going to see it's natural to see some of the teams that were thriving early in the season struggle now. We're kind of seeing this weird little reversal where it was the first half of the season, Birmingham and Kannapolis were incredible. They were dominating. They both won their divisions. And now you see Charlotte really playing well. Birmingham has struggled a lot. Canny with a little bit of a rough week this week. So it all evens out kind of. That's just how minor league baseball works at the end of the day. And it's fun to see these teams succeed, but you also have to realize like when they succeed, their good players are going to go up and then it's going to kind of even out, right?
And it's like you and I were talking about earlier, especially, some of these young pitchers like Pepper and Batista and Seth Keener, they haven't missed a start. They've got to be exhausted. Yeah. I mean, they're probably between 15 to 18 starts already. That's
100%.
a huge workload.
Yeah, 100%. So it's definitely tiring. It's a lot. These guys need the All-Star break. It's a good time to have an All-Star break. That's the way I'll put it. It's nice for sure. So moving on from Canny, going up to Winston, like we talked about, these promotions, they change things, right? Guys go up, they go down. Winston has some new pitching that's pretty fun to watch. Both Lucas Gordon and Tommy Vale kind of kicked. Tommy Vale's made 2 starts now, but Lucas Gordon and Tommy Vale are now entrenched in that Winston rotation, and both look pretty good, Jeff.
Yeah, they were the stars this week. Tanner McDougal and unfortunately Shane Murphy struggled, which is unfortunate, but Gordon and Vale were excellent. And Peyton Paulette, again, another good week out of the bullpen. So maybe he's found a home.
Yeah, I mean, I had teased that kind of for months, honestly. I mentioned it to you, the possibility of it. I think a while I'd mentioned Paulette potentially moving to the bullpen. Yep. Peyton Paulette could be a nasty reliever, Jeff, and I want to give him some praise here because it's been a rough year. It's been a rough 2 years for Peyton Paulette. He really coming off of his surgery, joining the organization after 2022. Like last year showed some signs, but it wasn't great. This year was even worse as a starting pitcher, right? Like he really was struggling this year. The command isn't there. He just hasn't looked all that comfortable. Peyton Paulette as a reliever is a different pitcher, Jeff. And Peyton Paulette as a reliever is someone that I'm kind of keyed in on a little bit and want to see where it takes him because 3 games now as a reliever and he's got 9 strikeouts across 5 1/3, 1 hit allowed across those 3 games, only 1 walk as well. So it's interesting. There's something to watch there for sure with Paulette out of the bullpen, in my opinion.
Yeah, very interesting. Then the only other news I think of note, a couple of things. Ryan Galaney and Wes Kath had 2 home runs each. It's always exciting. And Eddie Park led the team with 6 hits for the week. He was 6 out of 19, and it's good to see. It's been a bit of an adjustment for him in High A, so it's good to see him have a good week.
Definitely. Winston's going to get pretty fun, actually. That lineup has gotten a lot better with all those additions, with Caden Connor there and Galaney there and Park there, and now you're going to probably get 1 or 2 of the guys from this draft class. I think, like those guys I mentioned, I think a few of those college guys in the 3rd and 5th round could be at Winston by later in the season. Maybe they're in Canny all year, but I could see them maybe getting up to Winston even at the end of the year. I also think Hagen Smith, if they want to give him some more innings, he could definitely get some innings in Winston, maybe Kannapolis, but definitely could get some innings in Winston too. So overall, that team is looking more fun than it was earlier in the year. Birmingham, not a ton. Birmingham, you can tell, it's sad because like that vibe was so high early in the season. Like that team was the most amazing team to watch in minor league baseball the first 2 months of the year. They've just lost a lot of their guys. Like you can just feel there's just such a. I mean, Ramos has gone up, Quero went up, Baldwin went up, Thorpe went up. Eater and Bush are both now up. Like they've just lost a lot of that umph in that team. At the same time, there's still guys we're watching there. Don't get me wrong. Like there's still some super talented players there, of course. Jacob Gonzalez had a pretty solid week this week. All things considered, Johan Dominguez goes down to Birmingham because of all the other pitchers in Charlotte. Not because he was doing that poorly in Charlotte necessarily, but just because there's other guys that need innings in Charlotte now. Dominguez had an excellent first start with Birmingham. He'll probably get back up to Charlotte once some of those guys go to the big leagues from Charlotte. So overall, not a great week from Birmingham, but we still have guys there that we really like. But let's focus on your Charlotte Knights, Jeff. I want to go through the Charlotte team just this week and just everything you saw because you were at some games, you talked to some guys. Charlotte is playing great. They're looking great. And it's giving us a little bit of a taste of a bunch of guys that we could see on the roster after the trade deadline in 2 weeks.
Yeah, this week it was really the Brooks Baldwin show. I mean, he impressed. He really stood out. For the week, 10 out of 29, 3 doubles, 2 homers, 5 walks, 2 strikeouts. I mean, just terrific. Just terrific. Fun to watch. I interviewed him. Very, nice guy, confident. He's it's exciting. Edgar Quero, it's been an adjustment. 6 out of 22, but he's coming. He's getting a lot of play. He's, the lead catcher in Charlotte now. The other guy the other hitter who has been flying under the radar and kind of underperforming for part of the season is Don Fletcher, but he's been outstanding this week. And he made 3 catches that probably are 3 of the 10 best for the entire season. I mean, 3 fantastic plays. So excellent defender, and the bat's heating up. He's had some clutch hits. So,
what do you think? What do you see for Fletcher? Because I'm curious. Because the White Sox, I mean, the outfield has openings, but it's just there's a lot of players. None of them are that great. But I think maybe when Tommy Pham's traded, does Fletcher just slot right in? Does that kind of seem accurate?
Well, I mean, I just don't know if he's got the bat for a corner outfield. Especially
put him. That's the thing.
Especially if you're going to have Benintendi in one of the corners.
Yeah, that's Benintendi.
I don't know when they use that contract and move on, but
I mean, that's ideally if you can find a way to move Benintendi's contract, then you could slot Fletcher into left, and that's a pretty obvious fit, right? Because both those guys, you're right. I mean, you're 2 guys that have 0 power pretty much at this point, so it's a little tricky to justify 2 lineup spots for both those guys.
Yeah. And then the other, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say another hitter that I noticed. I don't know if we had mentioned him, but Brian Ramos had a pretty good week, right? I think he had a homer this week. I saw he had an RBI double. I think Ramos looked better this week from the games I checked in on than he has in the past few weeks.
Yeah. And you recall my conversation with Alan Zinter, who said, he and Colson, I'd like to see them. I want to see how they handle adversity. It's going to help them.
Yeah.
He's grinding away.
They're just keeping working. So some good hitting there for sure. Baldwin's obviously, I think, the headline there because it's just pretty spectacular the season that he's putting together. Every time I think he's going to slow down, he just gets going again. And it's like, okay, this guy's just truly good. Like he's really good. Like this is a major league player right here. So I'm ready to see Baldwin at the big league level. I hope that when Paul DeYoung is traded ultimately that they just say screw it and bring up Baldwin in August. I think he's ready at this point. I would love to see it. But who else on that roster? Let's flip over to the pitching side unless you've got more hitters.
No, pitching side, had 3 really exciting performances this week, and the one that really thrilled me was Davis Martin. He's finally back in Charlotte after a year of rehabbing, and he's such a nice guy. And I told him when I talked to him, I said, I don't know if you remember your last start, but I remember it vividly because it was his best start of the year, 6 shutout innings. And in the 6th inning, he was still throwing 97 miles an hour. I mean, it was just dominating. And then the next week, he went on the IL. But he came back, and he had, he was on obviously a pitch limit. He pitched 3.3 2/3 innings, 3 hits, no runs, no walks, 3 strikeouts. That's a great first performance.
Awesome to hear from Martin. I didn't get to watch much of that. What was his pitch mix looking like these days, Jeff? Because I know he's mixed around a little bit with his. I heard your interview. I wanted you to highlight that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me. When I was watching him pitch, I thought, wow, he's just going fastball, slider. And I said, he surely he has another pitch. So when I asked him about it, I said, "Were you just going with two pitches?" He said, "No, he's added the cutter." He said, "That's
The
you know,
White Sox cutter.
yeah." He said the Statcast was calling it a fastball, but there were two different fastballs, and
Fascinating. So
he
that's
said,
interesting. I mean, this is a trend, clearly. This is not just a coincidence. Like Brian Bannister is adding cutters up and down the farm system. And it's really cool to see because it's with especially with the slider guys, right? Like it's not curveball guys that are throwing the cutter as much. He's basically the emphasis is like instead of getting that fastball slider, let's just add a pitch that's in between, right? And that's
"Yep,
kind of this logic of just like throwing off timing where you have three pitches that are all generally similar planes, but that cutter is just that sharper, more quick version of that slider, and it's it has more movement than the fastball, but it's not far off in velocity from the fastball. So it's a really interesting thing that the farm system is doing, and you're seeing it at every different level of the system right now. And Davis Martin now clearly is another case of this cutter adding into a fastball slider combo.
yeah, you're right." I mean, three pitches all within 10 miles an hour of each
Yeah,
other, and they all look like fastballs initially.
right. It's
Yeah,
confusing. It's hard.
yeah.
So that's great
Um,
news. It's great to see Davis Martin. Who else on the bump was looking good down there?
So Kai Bush got in two games last week, and both of them, though, were piggybacking Mike Clevenger, who's still down here on rehab. I'm not really, I was kind of shocked that they had him piggybacking instead of starting because all these pitchers talk about routine, routine, routine. And this guy has been starting his whole career. And now he's coming out of the bullpen for these two games. I'm sure he'll get back into his normal routine, yeah, once Clevenger goes up. But I don't know. I thought they would have found a way to give him let him start and let someone else piggyback. His first outing was kind of rough, but then he came in yesterday to piggyback and looked great. The final line wasn't that strong: 5 innings, 5 hits, 4 earned runs, 2 walks, but like two of the earned runs, both walks, a couple of hits were all in his last inning. His first 4 innings, he was really dominant. All three pitches looked really good. So I think that's a great sign. When one of these Birmingham guys come up and
Yeah.
do well in Charlotte.
Yeah, 100%. It's great to see him kind of finding his groove there. I think it'll take some time. I think he'll have some games where he struggles a little bit more, but ultimately, like Bush is a guy or like another guy. We keep talking about this, but like he's another guy that like you can slot into the rotation pretty instantly after the trade deadline, right?
Right, right. And then the third guy is Sean Burke, and I mean, I see him getting a shot in Chicago. He was really highly regarded before he had all his shoulder injury, but I thought it was his best start of the season. He went 5 innings, 3 hits, 2 earned runs, no walks, 6 strikeouts. I mean, excellent.
Yeah, 100%. It's good to see. I still see Burke personally probably as more of a reliever long term, but at the same time, like, and just because there's also like not even after the deadline, like you can't give starts to everyone, right? Like you're gonna have to figure out who's gonna get the starts at this point. Like you've still got Nastrini down there, you've still got Mason Adams on the way, like you've got Eater, we just talked about who will make his Charlotte debut this week. Like there's so many guys, like, and that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong, but like there's just like, what does that look like? I'm not 100% sure yet. I think Burke is the type of guy where I could see him getting some like piggybacks, right? Like you make him the piggyback guy for one of the other starters, maybe. Same thing with Davis Martin, even if you're trying to limit Davis Martin's innings, maybe he's, a 3 inning piggyback type of guy. They're going to get creative, but like, at least we got some fresh arms, Jeff. I mean, that bullpen in Chicago is painful to watch. The starter is like quietly, I don't know if you saw this tweet of mine the other day, quietly, like the starting rotation in Chicago has been really good since June 1st. The White Sox rotation is third in ERA and first in quality starts in baseball. Pretty crazy. But the foursome of Crochet, Fetty, Cannon, and Thorpe has been really good. And even Chris Flexen's been decent. But then again, we know Fetty's out the door. Crochet is probably out the door. We'll see. But
Right.
there's going to be some starts to be found. Flexen's out the door for sure. So like there's going to be at least 2 or 3 starts a week that are now open. So it's going to come down to who's the most ready, who's hot at the time. And then how do you mix and match? Do you go, we saw like a weird little, they were limiting Crochet's innings. We saw Cannon piggyback for Crochet this week before the deadline, before the break. Like we're going to see some of those funky like piggyback type starts. And honestly, I'm here for it because let's give, at least for now, let's give all these starters 4 innings in a game, right? Even if they're coming out of the bullpen, let's continue to build up these guys and give the starters ample innings to see what they can do, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's been a lot of speculation that Kai Bush will eventually end up as the lefty in the bullpen. I can kind of see that actually.
I can too. I've said that for a little while now. I think I definitely could see that. But at the same time, like, who knows,
Yeah.
right? Like we're gonna see, right? Like there's a lot still to be seen at this point. We've got time, and right, this team is not going anywhere. The worst second half in baseball, one of the worst second halves ever from any team. So right, like or the first half's, pardon me, one of the worst first halves ever, and the second half's not going to be pretty. Once you trade some of these guys, it's going to get even uglier probably at some points. But with that said, it gives us a chance to get a lot of these prospects up, get them some innings, get them some experience, and see where we're at going into next year. Because going into 2025, like that's going to be a big year to just find what this team is going to be, right? And like the draft is a big part of that. The trade deadline is a big part of that. There's so many aspects to that, but we already have a ton of prospects we're excited to see that are ready, right? Like there's guys that are ready. So whoever it is, we're going to see at least 5+ of these Charlotte guys in Chicago come the second half of the season. And that's going to be fun. It's going to make the team more exciting. Even if they're losing, there's going to be at least some more intrigue there than there has been for much of this season so far.
Right. Yeah, and Drew Thorpe and Jonathan Cannon have looked great, and there's going to be, whether it's Mason Adams or Kai Bush or Davis Martin, there are other guys who are going to go up and look good, and there's 65 more starts left in this season, and
right.
I can see those guys getting the lion's share.
Yeah, we're gonna see them get made by people that are, at the very least interesting and fun to watch and worth, worth checking out and worth seeing what's gonna happen for the future. So we're gonna keep this one pretty short today. We don't have too much else to get into. Next week, Jeff, we are gonna do a full trade deadline breakdown. We're gonna do mock trades. I'm gonna bring a bunch of different mock trades to the table. We're gonna talk prospects on each team that are of interest. We're gonna talk which team's the best fit for which White Sox players, all of that stuff. We are just gonna give a full trade deadline preview because 2 weeks from 2 weeks from tomorrow, so 2 weeks from when this episode will drop, is the trade deadline. So a week out of the trade deadline, we might see something before then, frankly. We might see something over this break. But next week, we're going to do a really deep dive into the trade deadline because this is going to be a big deal. Now that we've seen this draft happen, now that the White Sox went Hagen Smith with the 5th overall pick, it's all about the hitters. Who are the best hitters the White Sox can get at this deadline? It's really that simple. Like sometimes it's more complicated. Sometimes there's more nuance to it. Like
Right.
it's that simple. Get the highest upside, most talented hitting prospects you can possibly find from any contender that wants the White Sox players.
Right. Yeah, you're right. So it's going to be interesting. Can they get like a guy like Keston Herstad? There are tons of great guys. Yankees, Dodgers, a lot of these teams are knee deep in prospects and need pitching. And this week we saw, just how expensive the pitching market is. We saw Hunter Harvey, Hunter Harvey get traded for a draft pick and a good minor leaguer. So,
so that was Hunter Harvey of the Nationals. For those who don't know, relief pitcher, setup guy, not even a closer, right? Like this is a quality setup guy, but not even a major league closer. Traded to the Royals of all teams, which is funny because the Royals are kind of teetering on the edge of trying to compete, but they don't really look like they can compete. But a Royals team that's had a good year, they buy a setup man in exchange for Caden Wallace, who by MLB Pipeline is their second ranked prospect. I think he's probably more of their 5th, 6th ranked prospect, but a solid top 200, 250-ish prospect for the Royals, in addition to a competitive round 2 pick. So that's a pick that the White Sox, the similar type of pick to what the White Sox got for the Gregory Santos deal that they used on Blake Larson yesterday. So that's a good quality draft pick in addition to a solid prospect for a setup man, right? Somebody's going to give the White Sox something for Michael Kopech, right? Like Michael Kopech's going to net something seriously. And then you look at, that you compare that value to like an Eric Fedde, right? Like Eric Fedde's going to get something nice. Like there was a time earlier this season where I was looking at Fedde and I was like, oh, it'd be great if the White Sox could get one borderline top 100, maybe like top 200 type of prospect for Eric Fedde. Like, no, the White Sox are going to get a top 100 prospect for Eric Fedde in addition to maybe another piece. Like that's pretty crazy. And that only further, in my mind, that only further pushes the idea that they got to trade Garrett Crochet. I cannot imagine them not doing it now, especially with Hagen Smith in the fold. Like Hagen Smith is going to fly, Jeff. Like Hagen Smith will be up next year. That's the type of guy that it's not quite Paul Skeens, obviously, but like he could be up late next season and like it wouldn't shock me at all. He's a lefty, he's funky, he's powerful, 100-mile-per-hour type stuff, right? Like that's your Garrett Crochet. Like I know people love Garrett Crochet and he's an all-star and he's had an exceptional season, and it's so cool to see Garrett Crochet become what he's become this season with the risk of his arm, with the fact that you don't think he's going to sign an extension in the next 2 years, and just how much pitching depth the team has in the market right now. you got to cash in on the top pitcher on the market. You can get 3 top 100 prospects at this point for Garrett Crochet, and hopefully all hitters, right?
And with Drew Thorpe no longer a prospect, do you think Smith is going to slot in now as the second best pitcher in the system?
Yeah. Oh, easily. Not even close. Yeah. No, I think he's going to be the 3rd best prospect in the entire system, actually. I think he's going to slot in right behind Colson and Noah Schultz and ahead of Quero, ahead of some of those other guys. Like he pretty firmly will be the number 3 prospect in the system, I believe. Yeah. I mean, Thorpe, I actually don't think Thorpe has graduated. I think he graduates with like 1 more start or something, but regardless, right. Thorpe is off the list soon. Hagen Smith will slot into that 3 spot in the farm system. We'll see where those high school guys slot in. I think those guys are probably both top 12 to 15 range in the system just because they're super young, but they're still, both those guys have a ton of upside. So there's a lot to dream on there, but it's exciting. There's a lot to come. We are going to have all the content. Any other thoughts from this week, Jeff? Because I think we're good, and we're going to really dive into the deadline next week, and I'll have the draft special coming out in a few days as well.
Well, my final thought is that I'm going to be paying attention to your Twitter feed tomorrow because there's a lot of intrigue and suspense in the third day of the draft, and you're going to be all over it. And so I'm going to be watching to see what your analysis is, and I suspect a lot of people who are listening to this tonight will be doing the same thing.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I appreciate that, Jeff. You can follow me on Twitter at ElijahEV8. You can follow Jeff Cohen. You're going to have excellent coverage, especially with this now all of a sudden incredibly fun Charlotte team. You can follow Jeff at AAA Jeff on X. Both of us are just going to keep delivering content. A little teaser: Jeff and I will be together in Charlotte in about a month from now. I'm getting myself out to the East Coast to go check out some baseball. We're going to go to some Candy games. We're going to go to some Charlotte games. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have a ton of content coming up. Stay tuned to the FutureSox. We got the draft special coming up in a few days with Dylan Barnes and myself. I have articles from all the different draft picks breaking down everybody. Hopefully we'll have a bunch of player interviews with the recent White Sox draft picks. So we've got it all. If you like the White Sox and you want to know what's going on with this future, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between, FutureSox is the place to go. And we will talk to you next week on the Roundup.